Imagine you're lost and alone in the vast, echoing wilderness of the Scottish Highlands. The mist clings to your skin, the wind whispers through the heather, and a deep loneliness begins to settle in your bones. In that quiet, desperate moment, what if your greatest wish for a companion was suddenly, miraculously granted? A beautiful woman appears from between the ancient trees. Her eyes seem to hold all the warmth you've been missing, promising an escape from the cold and solitude. She offers a smile, a hand, and an invitation to dance. But in the old glens of Scotland, where the veil between worlds is thin, you learn to be careful what you wish for. You learn that some wishes, when granted without the protection of a prayer, are answered by things far older and darker than any man. Because this is no ordinary woman. This is the Baobhan Sith, and she doesn't want your love. She wants your blood. The stories we tell are mirrors of our deepest fears. In the folklore of Scotland, the landscape itself is a character beautiful, but brutal. It's a place that can give life, but can just as easily take it away. And from this unforgiving beauty, legends were born. Not of sparkling, benevolent pixies, but of something far more primal. These are tales of survival, of caution, and of the terrifying knowledge that the most dangerous traps are often the most beautiful ones. The Baobhan Sith embodies this truth perfectly. She isn't just a monster that leaps from the shadows. She is a test. A seductive, deadly question posed to those who wander too far from the safety of the fire. How much do you trust a beautiful stranger? How easily can your own desires be turned against you? Today, we're exploring this chilling legend. We'll uncover the most famous telling of her tale, deconstruct the terrifying anatomy of this vampiric fairy, and explore why her story has haunted the Scottish imagination for centuries. This is more than a ghost story. It's a lesson, a warning that what you want most can be the very thing that destroys you. Section 1. The tale of the four hunters. Our story begins, as so many do in the Highlands, with the hunt. The air was sharp, promising a deep, star-filled night. Four young men, friends since boyhood, found themselves deep in the sprawling, empty wilderness of Rossshire. They were far from any village, as the last light of day bled from the sky, leaving the mountain peaks like jagged black teeth against a bruised purple canvas. Their hunt had been successful, but now bone-deep exhaustion was setting in. By a stroke of luck, or perhaps by some other design, they stumbled upon a small stone hut, a simple bothy left to the elements. It was empty, but it was shelter. A stack of dry peat and firewood piled in a corner felt like a gift from a god. As the youngest of the group coaxed a fire to life, the others settled in. They were strong, capable men, at home in the wild. But the wilderness at night is a different beast entirely. The familiar landscape transforms. Every shadow seems to writhe. Every gust of wind sounds like a whisper. The fire grew, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The men shared their rations and a flask of whiskey, the warmth spreading through their chests. Full of pride from a good day's work, their spirits were high. One of them was a fine singer, and to lift their spirits further, he began an old song of love and dancing. Another man stood up laughing and began to jig, his heavy boots thumping a rhythm on the packed earth floor. The little hut, once cold and lonely, was now filled with life. But the dancing felt hollow with no partners. After a few songs, the singer paused. "It's a fine night for a dance," he sighed. "If only we had company. I'd give anything for a partner right now." Another hunter, bold with whiskey, laughed and shouted, What I wouldn't give for some lovely lasses to join us." It was just a wish, a moment of youthful longing sent out into the ancient, listening night. They didn't cross themselves. They didn't ask for God's protection. And the night, it seemed, was ready to answer. No sooner had the words left their mouths than a sound came from outside, a soft scrape against the door. The men fell silent, their laughter dying. Who else could possibly be out here? Slowly, the door creaked open. Silhouetted against the inky blackness stood 4 figures. They were women, impossibly beautiful, each clad in a long, flowing gown of green or white. Their hair cascaded down their shoulders, and their faces, lit by the flickering firelight, were the most enchanting the men had ever seen. The hunters were speechless, mesmerized. It was as if their wish had been made flesh. The women smiled, their eyes shimmering. "You wished for partners," one said, her voice like the melody of a harp. "And so we have come." Caution dissolved by their intoxicating beauty, the hunters were overjoyed. They scrambled to their feet, each man choosing a partner. The singer, however, the eldest of the group, felt a cold knot of unease in his stomach that the whiskey couldn't warm. Some versions of the tale say he was simply captivated by the music in his own head and chose to sit back by the fire, providing the tune for the others. 3 of the hunters paired off with 3 of the beautiful strangers. They began to dance, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. The women were graceful, their movements fluid and hypnotic. The dance grew faster, more frenzied. The hunters were completely lost in the moment, utterly enchanted. But as the singer sat by the fire, his eyes following the swirling figures, he started to notice small, unsettling details. The women's delicate feet seemed to barely touch the ground. And beneath the hem of one long green dress, as it flared out in a wild turn, he caught a glimpse of what was underneath. Not a human foot. It was a hoof. A deer's cloven hoof. Cold dread washed over him. He looked closer, his gaze darting from one woman to the next. Their smiles, once so alluring, now looked predatory. Their eyes held a terrifying, hungry gleam. He noticed their fingers, long and elegant, but tipped with nails that seemed unnaturally sharp, like talons. His music faltered. He saw one of his friends lean in to whisper something to his partner. She smiled, a wide, dazzling smile, and rested her head against his neck, as if for a kiss. Then, the music stopped. It was replaced by a scream. A wet, gurgling sound cut short almost as soon as it began. The singer stared in horror. The beautiful woman hadn't kissed his friend. Her mouth was at his throat, and where her lips had been, blood now gushed, staining the front of his shirt. The young hunter collapsed, his eyes wide with shock and agony. The illusion shattered. The other 2 hunters turned to their own partners, but it was too late. The enchanting women were gone, replaced by shrieking, monstrous things with bared teeth. They fell upon the remaining 2 men, their long nails slashing through cloth and flesh, their mouths seeking blood. The small hut became a slaughterhouse, the air thick with the coppery smell of blood. The lone survivor was frozen for a heart-stopping second, before raw primal panic broke through. He scrambled backward and bolted for the door, not daring to look back. He burst out into the freezing night, the terrible shrieks of the creatures echoing behind him. He ran blindly, lungs burning, stumbling over rocks and through wet bog. He could hear them behind him, gliding through the darkness like wraiths. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw them, their white and green dresses stark against the night, their faces pale and demonic. He couldn't outrun them. They were creatures of the wilderness. He was just a man. Then, through his fear, a memory surfaced, an old tale about the Aosc, the fairy folk. Before entering the bothy, they had tethered their Highland ponies nearby. Sturdy, reliable beasts. Crucially, they had been newly shod. Their hooves were protected by shoes of cold iron. Iron, the one thing all fairy creatures were said to fear. With a new surge of adrenaline, he changed direction, sprinting towards the horses. The ponies were agitated, their eyes rolling in fear. He dove into the middle of the small herd, crouching between their powerful bodies, praying the old lore was true. The terrified horses stamped and kicked, their iron-shod hooves striking the rocky ground. The Baobhan Sith stopped. They circled like wolves kept from a lamb, the scent of the iron an invisible wall they could not cross. They shrieked in rage, their beautiful voices twisted into ear-splitting screeches. They tried to lure him out, their voices becoming sweet again. "Come out, sweet singer," one cooed. "We only want to dance." When flattery failed, they turned to taunts, describing in horrifying detail what they had done to his friends, mocking their screams. They tried to enrage him, to make him charge out in a fit of grief. But the hunter stayed put, his face pressed against the warm, trembling flank of a pony, his hands covering his ears, tears of terror and loss streaming down his face. He squeezed his eyes shut and prayed for the dawn. The night stretched into an eternity. And then, finally, a faint gray line appeared on the eastern horizon, the first hint of morning. As the light grew, the shrieking changed to a wail of defeat. With one final piercing cry, they vanished. Some say they turned into hooded crows and flew away. Others say they simply dissolved like smoke on the wind. The hunter remained there, trembling, until the sun was fully up. When he finally found the strength to stand, he stumbled back to the bothy. The scene inside was one of unimaginable horror. His three friends lay where they had fallen, their bodies pale, their throats and chests torn open, completely drained of blood. He fled that cursed place and ran until he reached the nearest village, bursting into the tavern with a wild, haunted look in his eyes. He told his story. The villagers, who knew the old tales, listened in grim silence. They knew he wasn't mad. He was the sole survivor of an encounter with the Baobhan Sith, the white women of the Scottish Highlands. His story became a legend, a chilling reminder passed down through generations. Be wary of the lonely dark, and be careful what you wish for. Section 2. Deconstructing the Demon. That harrowing tale is the most famous story about the Baobhan Sith, but it's far from the only one. So to really understand these creatures, we need to dissect the anatomy of the legend itself. What exactly is a Baobhan Sith? Let's start with the name. In Scottish Gaelic, Baobhan Sith can be translated as fairy witch. The word Sith, pronounced shee, is a general term for the supernatural race from Gaelic mythology. But the Baobhan Sith belong to a much darker category. They aren't just mischievous. They are malevolent predators. Sometimes called the white women of the Scottish Highlands. They're kin to figures like the Banshee, but with one key difference. The Banshee foretells death. The Baobhan Sith delivers it. Their appearance is their primary weapon. By all accounts, they appear as breathtakingly beautiful women in long, flowing dresses, typically green or white. Green is a color heavily associated with fairies and the otherworld in Scottish folklore. This beautiful disguise is a form of glamour, a magical illusion meant to disarm their prey. But the long dress also serves a practical purpose. It conceals their most telling non-human feature. Beneath the elegant fabric, the Baobhan Sith have the hooves of a deer or a goat. This single detail is a classic folkloric warning, a sign that a beautiful stranger is anything but human. The Baobhan Sith are also shapeshifters in some versions of the legend. While their preferred form is a beautiful woman, some tales claim they can transform into a hooded crow or raven. This allows them to watch their prey from a distance, unseen, before choosing the perfect moment to reveal themselves. This link to crows and ravens is deeply symbolic, as these birds are often associated with war and death in Celtic mythology, suggesting the Baobhan Sith may be a folk memory of a much older, more powerful deity. Their behavior is that of a highly specialized predator. They are nocturnal, hunting exclusively at night and vanishing at dawn. Their hunting grounds are the remote, isolated parts of the Highlands where travelers are most vulnerable. Their targets are almost always men, particularly hunters. Some folklorists believe the scent of blood from a fresh kill attracts them. Others suggest it's because these men are alone and filled with a longing for companionship that the Baobhan Sith can cruelly exploit. And a creepy pattern emerges in the stories. The creatures often appear right after a man wishes aloud for female company. This ties into a deep-seated belief in Scottish tradition that a wish made at night, without invoking God's protection, is an open invitation to dark forces. The Baobhan Sith are, in a sense, malicious genies, granting a wish in the most terrible way imaginable. Their method of attack is what solidifies their place as a vampiric being. The dance is central to their hunt, a tool of seduction and enchantment that lures victims into a state of ecstatic distraction. Once the victim is captivated, the attack is swift and brutal. While modern vampires might use fangs, the folklore here is often more visceral. The Baobhan Sith are said to use their long, unnaturally sharp fingernails to tear open the throats or chests of their victims, allowing them to drink their blood directly from the source. They drain their victims completely, leaving behind a pale, lifeless husk. But like all creatures of folklore, they aren't invincible. Their most famous weakness is iron. This is a very common trait among fairies in Celtic traditions. Iron, a product of human civilization, is seen as anathema to the wild magic of the supernatural world. It acts as a repellent, an invisible barrier they cannot cross. This is why the hunter in our story was safe among the iron-shod horses. Their other major weakness is sunlight. They are creatures of the night, and the coming of dawn is fatal. Some legends even suggest they must retreat to coffins buried in the earth, and that if one were to find their grave during the day, the creature could be trapped by piling a cairn of stones on top of it. These vulnerabilities paint a picture of a creature that, while terrifyingly powerful in its element, is bound by ancient rules. Section 3. The roots of the legend. So where does a story like this come from? Myths are never born in a vacuum. The legend of the Baobhan Sith is a powerful window into the historical Scottish psyche, reflecting the very real dangers of the landscape and the anxieties of the society that told her story. At its most basic level, it's a warning against the dangers of the wilderness itself. The Scottish Highlands are breathtakingly beautiful, but for those who lived there hundreds of years ago, that beauty was intertwined with danger. A person could easily get lost, succumb to the elements, or fall prey to predators. The Baobhan Sith is the personification of this hidden danger. She represents the idea that a beautiful, inviting glen can hide a deadly secret. She is the fear of what lurks in the shadows when you are miles from home. It's also a pretty stark moral and religious warning against temptation. The hunters aren't attacked at random. They are attacked after they wish for carnal companionship without the spiritual protection of a prayer. In a deeply religious society, this detail is crucial. It frames their fate not as an accident, but as a direct consequence of weakness. The creatures are beautiful because temptation itself is beautiful. The story teaches a lesson. Be careful what you wish for, because the devil, or his Gaelic equivalent, is always listening. This also touches on historical gender anxieties. In a patriarchal society, powerful and independent female figures were often viewed with suspicion. A Baobhan Sith is the ultimate monstrous feminine. She exists outside the bounds of normal society, using her beauty and sexuality not for family or community, but as tools for predation. She seduces men, dominates them, and ultimately destroys them. This can be read as a cultural expression of the fear of female power and autonomy. The Baobhan Sith doesn't exist in isolation either. She has a lot in common with the succubus of medieval European demonology and the sirens of Greek mythology. Within Celtic traditions, she's related to figures like the Línan Cid of Irish folklore, a fairy muse who offers inspiration in exchange for an artist's life. She also has a thematic link to the Banshee, the fairy woman who wails to foretell a death. But the Baobhan Sith is more direct. She doesn't just announce death, she causes it. Some scholars even trace her lineage back to ancient, pre-Christian goddesses. Figures like the Morrigan in Ireland were complex deities of war, death, and the land itself, both benevolent and terrifying. It's possible that as Christianity spread, these powerful, morally ambiguous female deities were demonized in folklore, shrinking from powerful goddesses into bloodthirsty monsters like the Baobhan Sith. Her association with deer and crows could be a remnant of an older nature deity. Her vampirism, a later addition reflecting a changing worldview. Section 4. The Baobhan Sith in Modern Times. Myths are not static. They adapt and evolve. The Baobhan Sith is a perfect example of a creature who has leaped from the misty glens of Scotland into modern pop culture. While she may not be as famous as Dracula, her unique blend of fairy allure and vampiric terror has ensured her survival. Her archetype, the beautiful, supernatural woman offering a deadly embrace, can be seen in figures like the brides of Dracula in Bram Stoker's novel. But she's also made more direct appearances. She shows up in fantasy novels like Raymond de Feist's fairy tale and has inspired characters in the works of authors like Neil Gaiman, who masterfully weaves old myths into modern settings. In contemporary fantasy, creators love her because she offers a unique twist on familiar tropes. She isn't just a vampire. She's a fairy vampire. This allows for a cool blending of mythologies, the weaknesses of fairies, like a vulnerability to iron, combined with the bloodlust of a vampire. Her shape-shifting and hidden hooves also provide fantastic visual potential. This is especially true in gaming. The popular mobile game Fate Grand Order features a prominent character named Baobhan Sith. Here, she's reimagined as a complex and tragic figure, a fairy knight, whose vicious personality is a defense mechanism forged by a traumatic past. This interpretation, while taking creative liberties, has introduced the legend to a massive new global audience, sparking a huge amount of interest in her folkloric origins. So why does this particular creature continue to resonate? Because she's the embodiment of betrayal. She is the ultimate beautiful trap. She plays on the primal fear that appearances can be deceiving, that something wonderful can hide something horrifying. It's the fear of the poisoned apple, the Trojan horse, the beautiful stranger with dark intentions. In a world where we interact with people through digital veils, the idea of a beautiful facade hiding a monstrous reality feels very relevant. The Baobhan Sith is a story about the danger of trusting only what you see and the terrifying consequences of letting desire override your instincts. She is a reminder that the most dangerous monsters are often the ones we invite inside. The story of the Baobhan Sith is just one of thousands that come from the rich soil of folklore. Every country, every region has its own unique monsters and cautionary tales. What local legends did you grow up with? Is there a creature from your hometown's folklore that kept you up at night? Share your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear about the monsters that haunt your corner of the world. Conclusion: the legend of the Baobhan Sith is more than just a spooky story. It's a tapestry woven from fear, desire, and the stark beauty of the Scottish Highlands. She is a living embodiment of a timeless warning that beauty can be a mask for brutality, that temptation can be a doorway to destruction, and that in the lonely, wild places of the world, you should never speak your deepest wishes into the darkness. She is the dance in the lonely hut, the promise in a stranger's eyes, and the cold reality of blood on the floor. She is a symbol of the truth that some of the oldest stories survive for a reason. They remind us of the dangers that hide in plain sight and the monsters that wear human faces. So the next time you find yourself alone, far from home, remember the tale of the four hunters. Remember the music, the dance, and the dawn that came too late for three of them. And ask yourself, are all beautiful things truly good? Or are some just better at hiding their hooves?